In that case, hello everyone. I'm Guillermo Rodriguez. I'm the Director of Evidence and Data here at the Center for Homelessness Impact, and this is a webinar for prospective delivery partners for a project that we're about to start on personal grants. I'm joined by my colleagues Michelle Binfield and Graham Gardner, and they can say hi in a minute as well. So, as you might know, here at CHI, we have a mission to really focus on improving the lives of those experiencing homelessness or who are at risk of homelessness through evidence-led change by really focusing on our understanding of what works and supporting areas to implement the findings that come from that evidence and data. So a couple of housekeeping points for this webinar. The webinar will be recorded, so you will be able to access that at a later date if you need so. And we'll also be making available all of the links for the project briefs as well as this presentation. And you will see all of the information there in the link that is at the end of the page. We'll go through quite a few pieces of information that are relevant for this project throughout this presentation. And if you have any questions, please add them to the Q&A function. Please do not use the chat for that, and we'll have time at the end for any of the questions. The team that is joining me today are Michelle and Graham. Guys, you want to say hi before we move on to the rest as well? Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle Binfield. I'm the Director of Programs and Implementation here at the Centre.
And Graham?
And hi there, I'm Graham Gardner. I'm the Head of Programs at the Centre.
In addition to Michelle and Graham, the team is also includes Ella and Beth, who are not joining us today. And we're also really grateful to St. Martin's in the Field and the City Foundation, which have provided part of the funding that enables this whole program to happen. So if you're here, it's because you're interested in cash transfers for some reason, but we felt that as part of setting the scene, it's important to just take a bit of a step back and remind all of us why cash transfers can be an interesting intervention to support people who are experiencing homelessness. So of course, cash transfers do what they say in the tin. It's really about offering cash directly to people who are living in poverty. And this is really important because people who are living in poverty deserve the dignity to choose how to improve their lives for themselves, and offering them cash can potentially enable that mechanism. Really interestingly, this is still one of those interventions that has been really common in the space of anti-poverty interventions, especially in the Global South, with many of the high-quality evaluations happening across the globe in this space. Cash transfers really started in international development, and probably the seminal study happened in Uganda that found really interesting impacts across a large range of domains. And since then, a really large number of studies have happened. There was a recent review done by ODI a couple of years ago that identified 165 studies done across 15 years. And the really powerful thing is that they identified improvements across a range of outcomes, from poverty and savings to education, health, but also things like employment and empowerment. But cash transfers have not been used just in the Global South. There's also a tradition in the Global North. Probably the best example of those initial interventions was in Las Vegas. It was actually the Harrah's Casino, which was built in an Indian reservation. And they started offering cash transfers to people in the community of around $2,000 to $3,000 paid twice a year to over 16,000 people. Fast forward, really interesting as well, researchers that were evaluating this program identified also this range of positive outcomes across a range of domains. There were improvements in terms of education, domestic violence, crime rates, mental health, etc., etc. And since then, there have been many other initiatives also in the Global North. More recently, in the last couple of years, we have seen a fledgling start in these types of initiatives in homelessness. And probably the example that many of you might have heard of was in Vancouver. a couple of years ago because a New Leaf project supported people who had long histories of street homelessness with a single transfer that was roughly about £4,000. And the results of that project were also really promising, particularly in terms of housing stability, but other things like the amount of money that was spent on food security and other types of substantial investments into improving people's lives. In the last 2 years or so, we also saw a couple of other projects, particularly in the US, that are offering much more substantial investments, focusing in single young people, but also on families that have experiences of homelessness. These projects offer much larger offers of support and also do them over a period of up to 2 years, and they're being evaluated through robust randomized controlled trials, and we'll definitely be keeping an eye out to the findings of those studies. But the reason we say all of these is because all in all, the evidence suggests two key things. First, is that despite all of the stereotypes, people are not abusing the cash transfers. People are not necessarily using that to buy additional alcohol, cigarettes, or so-called temptation goods, but instead they make substantial investments that enable them to be in a different path and support investments that are much more productive and helpful for their livelihoods. And that's the second key thing, which is that cash transfers can really have long-term impacts across a range of domains because they enable those significant investments into things that matter for them. Despite all of this evidence, cash transfers remain really rare in the global north, and particularly as one of those tools for poverty alleviation in the space of homelessness. In the UK, we at CHI have been working on a series of initiatives to help us create the evidence necessary to see these types of initiatives scale. So the first of those projects was a really small pilot focusing on people who had experiences of homelessness, and now we're launching this specific project, which will be a larger pilot, also focusing on people who had long experiences of rough sleeping. We have a couple of other projects. One of them is focusing on young people who are aging out of care. And you might have also heard about the personalized budget project that we have with Greater Change, which is slightly different because that project is managed by a caseworker. As part of this program, we also felt that it was relevant to share some of the reflections from our initial pilot in cash transfers. So in that initial phase, we had around 81 people, of which 36 ended up receiving a cash transfer. And we worked across a series of partners in Scotland, in Wales, and in England, and then ended up with a population of which around 1 in 3 had slept rough in the previous year, but around 4 out of 5 had slept rough at some point in their life. So really focusing on people who have really substantial experiences of homelessness. A lot of evidence that we were collating through that small pilot suggested that people were really using the funds to make substantial investments on things like furniture to improve their living conditions, trying to help others, making sure that they had some savings in case of emergencies, or making investments on things like computers or phones that they needed. The qualitative evidence of this initial pilot is also really encouraging. They suggest that it enabled them to create better communication with their families and friends. They felt more connected, and they felt that they had more mental bandwidth to make important decisions. However, the sample was too small at this point to help us to make the robust conclusions that we require to see this type of initiative scale. And that's exactly the reason why, with the support of St. Martin's in the field and City Foundation, we decided to do this scale-up project to help us achieve the sample necessary to reach robust conclusions. We have also been able to do lots of learning on how we take these projects into the field. And one of the key lessons has been about really close collaboration between CHI, the research team, and organizations like yourselves, and really making sure that there's substantial support to facilitate referrals and all of the other research processes that are necessary when doing a randomized controlled trial. That's one of the reasons why we have decided to include an embedded researcher, and we'll cover that in a bit more detail in a few minutes to explain what their role will be. Some of the other things that we have learned as well is that it's really important to make sure that there's a short period of time between the point where someone gets referred and the point where they effectively get onboarded into the project and they receive the cash, so that we don't lose people throughout that process. And making sure that we have a range of areas and that we have a range of organizations to work with, because we know that we'll lose some people as they go through the process. Going into the project, over to you, Graham.
Okay, thank you very much, Guillermo. So I'm just going to take us through what this project is about, how we anticipate it will be delivered, the timelines, and then also how to apply to take part over the next few slides. If you can, the next slide, please. Thank you. So this is the essential information of what we're looking for. So across Belfast and London, we're inviting organisations who wish to take part to apply. We are looking for a total across those two locations of 500 referrals in total. That is because we expect not all of those referrals will go on to take part in the project. Sometimes, as you will know, people move on, they leave services, there's troubles getting in contact with them. So we know from our previous projects that we need a lot more referrals than the eventual number of people that will take part in the project. That will be 250 people. And this is a randomized controlled trial, which Guillermo will speak about more in a second. But essentially, that means half the people get the intervention, which is £2,000 of cash transfers, and half the people don't. So in total, 125 people will receive the service. The project is going to be evaluated by King's College London, who have worked with us on projects of these types in the past, and also make sure that we have a really ethical approach to this project. And we're hoping to launch the grant process. So that's the application process where we're inviting you to apply to take part on the 19th of February. The application will be open for about 2.5 weeks. I'll talk to you about the application in a moment. And then we're looking to set up the projects with yourselves in April and May of this year, with ideally launching in June. That June will be when we start to recruit people experiencing homelessness into the project, and we're looking to run that for 6 months up until November. Once that's done, there's a kind of follow-up data collection with the embedded researcher in KCL, and then King's College London will produce an interim report in July 26 with the aim of producing a final report to get those strength of conclusions that Guillermo was talking about in February 27, and you'll be involved throughout the way. But obviously, the intensive bit of work is between now and the end of November 25. Thank you. Okay, so this is again just a bit more detail of what we're looking for. So as I was saying earlier on, 500 referrals we're anticipating across Belfast and London, with 250 people to be fully onboarded onto the project. What we're looking for is people that your organizations are working with who have experience of homelessness. They could be living in any type of temporary accommodation currently, and we use quite a wide definition of temporary accommodation. So that could be your in-statutory accommodation in a B&B, in a temp flat, but it could also be sofa surfing, or unfortunately maybe sleeping in the car or something like that. I'd also say that should say experience of homelessness and rough sleeping. So again, we include rough sleeping within homelessness. We're looking for you to support them, so that they are maybe assigned a support worker with your team when the project starts, and you probably anticipate working with them for another couple of weeks after that. So that's so we can help distribute the £2,000 if they're part of that group. We're looking for them to have a bank account, and if they don't have a bank account, we're looking for the organisations to apply to help them get a bank account, and that's again just so that cash transfer can be made into that bank account. And then we're looking for a bit of your assessment on that the person is suitable for the project. So where the person wouldn't be suitable, it's where there would be a risk that the potential cash transfer could create a serious risk of harm to themselves or to someone else. For that, we are quite We accept that some people, just to call out the issue, will use, or could be using alcohol or other drugs, but they might actually be really stable on that, and they might be working with your support to continue their treatment or recovery from that as well. So we're absolutely fine with people in those situations being involved in cash transfer. I guess is where we're looking at there would be a harm to themselves, or they could create harm to others. So, for example, suicidal ideation, or there's domestic violence or domestic abuse risk within there as well, or coercive control. They would also be excluded if they have a previous conviction for fraud or deception. And then finally, if they have £4,000 or more in savings. And that is so that if they were on universal credit, where the threshold is £6,000, before people's universal credit would start to taper off. So if they have more than £4,000 and they get a £2,000 cash transfer, that might impact their universal credit. So we're looking for people with fewer savings than that. Okay. Okay, and then this is what we're looking for, I guess, in the process of supporting someone. So the first thing to say is that we're asking everyone to continue to support people the way that you already do. That wouldn't change for people in the group that get the cash transfer, or the people in what we would call the business as usual group. They get the same service that you would be delivering. If they're due to move on to other services, just continue with that. This is so, again, we can get the best comparison. How it would work is a support worker could identify someone who would be suitable for the project, and they would speak to that person experiencing homelessness. We're asking them to have a chat with a colleague, just do a bit of sense making about the risks. And if they think that the person's appropriate, which again, most folk will be, to make the referral to KCL. Again, I said to help them open a bank account. And then we're asking if the person is randomized into the intervention group so that they're going to get the £2,000, that your organization would make that transfer directly into their new bank account. And that's mostly to protect them, and so that CHI doesn't have tons of personal bank account details. But there is one other protection in there, which is that we ask that you wait 2 weeks after they're notified that they're in the intervention group. And that's essentially a cooling off period. And that's part of the ethical arrangements that KCL have to put in place to undertake this research. And again, it's just so that there can be that time to consider, perhaps with a support worker, how they're going to spend the £2,000. I said, continue to support them as normal. We would ask that you let if they're moving on to another organization, that you let them know that they've been part of this project, and then you also let the embedded researcher know. So that would be a CHI employee that is working with you, and the embedded researcher's role will be to help you with queries around all of this, but also then keep track of the person over time, and that's so we can measure the outcomes that they've had. So if someone moves on from your project or service, you let the embedded researcher know, and they can follow up with the new support agency or with the person directly in the future. So I did mention there that we're asking yourselves to pay the £2,000. That will obviously be covered by CHI. We're quite a small organization, so we don't have, in a very practical sense, a bank run every day that some larger organizations do. So we'll pay those, we're anticipating paying those £2,000 in arrears, and that would be like 2 invoices per month that you can send us, and then we'll transfer that back over to yourselves. And Graham was going to tell you a bit more about the evaluation method now.
Excellent. So as Graham was saying, the evaluation will be undertaken by King's College London, and we have worked with them in a couple of the other projects looking at cash transfer. So they have lots of experience into the ethical challenges that something like this will pose, but also some of the mitigations that we need to put in place to make sure that these can be done effectively and it can be done ethically as well. The importance of the evaluation is that it will really help us to create that evidence so that then we can help these projects scale. And it's really important that we'll be including 3 key components as part of the evaluation. The first one is the impact, to help us quantify the difference that something like this makes. The second one is around the process, so we can start understanding a bit more the why some of these changes happen. And of course, the final element will be the economic evaluation, to put pounds against some of the benefits and the costs of implementing these types of solutions. The impact evaluation, as we have alluded to before, will be done through a randomized control trial. And this basically means that out of the participants that are selected into the project, 50% of them will be randomly allocated to receiving the cash transfer, and the other 50% will be remaining in a control group where they continue receiving all of their support as in business as usual. This is really, really important because a randomization basically allows to build two groups that are comparable. We know that some people might improve over time or might do worse over time. And by creating these two groups in a randomized way, we can basically account for that natural change that people will have over time and make sure that the only thing that is different between the two groups is the fact that one of them received the cash transfer. As a consequence, randomization is really, really key to understand the impact of the cash transfer, and we'll go into a bit more of that in a minute as well. All partners, of course, will be expected to take part in some of these evaluation activities. But of course, if there are any questions, we'll be here to help and ensure that all of the requirements are really clear. As Graham was also saying, the evaluation will go through really robust ethical checks. We have done the same for the previous projects, and we're happy to confirm that there haven't been any adverse outcomes that need to be reported, which is really reassuring. But also that will continue to refine based on their previous experiences. The other key thing that we're really, really conscious about is, of course, minimizing the burden on your staff and on your teams. We know that this is additional to your work and that you are, of course, really stretched and that you have other pressures. So a lot of the effort that the team will be putting at King's, at CHI, and the embedded researcher is to try to minimize that burden as much as we can. However, there's some crucial steps where we'll definitely need your support, but we'll try to ease them as much as we can with briefs and other resources to make sure that you have all of the information that you need to take part in the different processes that are necessary. This slide basically summarizes the steps of taking part in the project for a specific participant. So you'll have these at the end, so you can look at it in lots of detail, but we felt that it was useful to walk you through the stylized process for the project. So the first box at the top left basically means that your team will identify through the services that you have some of the potential beneficiaries that are relevant for this project. And then, as Graham was explaining in that second box that is on gray, we expect two of your caseworkers to have a conversation about the eligibility of that particular person. If you have some questions or if you want to have some support from the embedded researcher, you can have conversations with them as well to support that process. Throughout that process, then we would expect your lead caseworker to have a conversation with the person and explain some of the basics of the project and basically receive consent to pass on those contact details to King's to do the more formal process of consent, which is that next step. At that point, King's will basically take over. They'll go through the formal consent process with the person and collect some baseline information. They will, at that point, randomize people into the intervention and the control and let the services know whether the person has been allocated to either of those groups. At that point, we basically have two options. For those that are in the intervention group, we will expect a 2-week cooling off period, which is the point that Graham was explaining. We'll let you know that person A should be receiving the transfer, and they should not receive the transfer in less than 2 weeks. And during that period, if they want, the caseworker should have a conversation with them to help them consider what are the ways in which they could spend that money. Really, really importantly, it should be the decision of the person rather than the caseworker, but we feel that having that coaching role can be really beneficial to enable good investments to happen. If you know that a participant might need some support creating a bank account, it would be really important to make sure that those steps are taken so the transfer can be made. After that process, it goes back to Kings, and the team will go back to the person at 6 months and 12 months after they receive the transfer to complete an additional survey and make sure that we're capturing all of the relevant outcomes. This will happen both in the treatment and in the control. And one of the key things that we might need your support there is following up with people that might not be responding to our surveys or that we might lose contact with. For example, if you have information that you stop providing support for a specific person, but that you know that they have been referred to another person, informing the embedded researcher of that move will be really powerful and really helpful for us to be able to follow up. Also, if you know that a specific person has not responded, and you can have a conversation as part of your usual touch points with that person, that would also make sure that we have better response rates down the road for the whole project. This is a current plan, which is still being finalized with the team at King's, and we'll also open up an opportunity for those selected services to help us refine and make sure that this works for everyone involved. There's a lot to do for the evaluation, and we know that this will be part of the journey, but we felt that it was useful to just give you a handful of the key things to keep in mind for the evaluation. So the first one is, as I was saying before, the randomization is absolutely key. We need to make sure that the intervention group and those in the control are really, really comparable. And that means that only those that have been selected for the intervention should be the ones that receive the intervention. But that also means that those that are in the control must remain as a control. So we shouldn't be offering them additional support, because that would mean that we're not comparing the same thing on both sides. The second thing is that participation must be voluntary. People need to want to take part in this project, and it should be informed. But also, it's really important that participation should not feel too pressured. One of the implications of this, and we had quite a few debates with the team at King's around this, and it was one of the requirements from their ethical board, was that people should not know the amount of money that they would receive until the point where they have been randomized into receiving that money. So it's really important that when you're having those initial conversations, explaining the project, you simply suggest that they might be receiving some financial support without saying that they might be receiving £2,000 in support. This is really important because if the word spreads and everyone knows that they might potentially receive £2,000, we might need to close the site and stop referrals from that area. Of course, we don't want to do that. So it's really, really important that we don't tell people at the point where they are doing the initial consent. They will be told after they have been randomized. Third thing is that randomizing is really important, but we also need to make sure that only those people who have been randomized are those that are effectively included in the project. So we're trying to minimize that time between that initial conversation that you're having and the point of randomization. And that means that the referring process has to happen as quickly as we can. The fourth point that I was trying to make as well is that randomization is really important. But at the end, we need to be able to follow people up to compare the outcomes that they face. So that's why we'll need your support, both in the intervention and the control, to get contact details and give people additional prompts if necessary, if they're not responding to service or if they're not responding to some of the other activities as part of the project. And the final point is, you haven't done this in the past, and we're here to help. The reason why we have been building the idea of bringing an embedded researcher and all of these resources is to make this as easy as possible for all of you to take part. So at any point, if you're in doubt, please ask. Over to you, Graham.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to just take us through the application process in a second, but before I do that, we just want to go a wee bit into be a bit more explicit with our ask and what we mean to take part in the project. So for your frontline teams, your support workers, helping people who are experiencing rough sleeping or homelessness, we would need them to attend some briefing sessions to learn about the project and the processes around it. As we've said already, to check the eligibility of people and explain the project to them, and then have that conversation with another support worker and the embedded researcher if possible. And again, I'm just repeating kind of what Gemma was saying here earlier on about then having that conversation about how to use the money, supporting opening a bank account if needed, and then maybe some help with the data collection for those who don't respond. But again, we've had the embedded researcher to help with that as well. Also, something we've not mentioned is that as part of that research that'll be undertaken by King's, it will be that process evaluation, and that's kind of like how the project's been implemented. So we would like to interview some of the support workers about that. And again, King's would be doing that. That would be totally independent of CHI, and but they would have to kind of go through a process to make sure we're asking appropriate questions of your support workers. For yourself or other managers listening in, what we need from the organization is this buy-in, and then I suppose devoting time to this work. There will be some agreements to sign and some data protection arrangements to sign. So you're making sure that information governance colleagues know about that. Making those payments that I alluded to earlier on to participants. And again, we're looking for that 2 weeks after randomization. So there's not a big gap between when the person hears about the project and decides to take part and when they are getting the money in the bank account. We would then hold monthly check-ins. These are just like keeping in touch meetings, generally last less than half an hour. And it's just to see how things are going and help you resolve any issues that are occurring. And that would be with Ella, one of our program leads. And then generally we hold project group meetings. And that brings together all the services working across Belfast and London in this case. And that's to share common information to meet the evaluators, for example, KCL, and also to learn from each other about how the project's being implemented and how it's going. Generally, these take place after everyone's signed their agreements and we're just starting up the project into the delivery phase. Shortly after delivery starts, to get some early learnings and reflections, and I guess share if we need to amend anything. Somewhere close to the project ending, and then a review point just after the project's ended as well. So 3 or 4, depending on how recruitment goes. And then, just like any other agreement, we would want to know if there's any complaints or any data breaches or anything like that, or safeguarding issues for anyone who takes part in the project. Again, we have this embedded researcher, so I think one of the things we're looking for as well is that embedded researcher to be working within your teams. So that would be maybe sharing some office space. They'll be going between London and Belfast. You're sitting in your team meetings, and we'd ask that you'd be comfortable having them around your services. So with all that, I'll now go on to the application process if you want to take part. And I will say at the very end of this slide deck, there's going to be a QR code. And if you get your cameras ready and you can it will come up with a link and you'll get taken directly to the slide deck. So you can review as many times as you want at your leisure, because there's quite a bit of information. Hopefully you'll be interested coming in here again. So on the 19th of February, we're going to publish the full specification and the application form on our system called FlexiGrant. That'll be available from the Personal Grants webpage. Our provisional closing date is going to be 5 p.m. on the 7th of March. That is a short 2.5-week window for applications in. I'm conscious that's a bit shorter than usual, and because of that reason, I'm actually going to tell you the questions we're going to ask you today, just so you can start getting prepared and you can do whatever you need to do in your organization to consider taking part. Once we have all your applications in, one of our program leads, so Ella and another of our program leads, and Beth, one of our evidence leads, will assess your applications essentially. So it'll be a scoring matrix on 0 to 4. We'll tell you the scoring matrix in the FlexiGrant portal when it's published. And then I will moderate that meeting just to make sure all the scores have been done equitably across the board. Then we need to consider all of the applications against the evaluation criteria. So this is when myself and Graham will go in the room and we decide, do we have what we need to undertake this project? The main decision criteria there will be, do we have the anticipated number of referrals we need across London and Belfast? If the answer is no, we might need to get more organisations. If the answer is yes, or we have 1,000 potential referrals, we need to make a decision about who to include and who to exclude. Once we've done that meeting, we'll let you know. And then we've got some due diligence checks that we need to complete with you, mostly just because we're transferring money at the end of the day. And we just need to make sure that everyone is on the sound financial footing. We then have a grants and evaluation committee within CHI, and they oversee all of our projects. That is an internal quality assurance check and balance for us within Michelle, Guillermo, and myself. So we would report to them to get approval to award the to say yes to your applications essentially. And as soon as that's done, we can get those contracts signed and start our mobilisation. So I'm going to take you through the Flex Grant process. Once the link becomes available, you'll get a screen like this. If you go to the top right-hand corner and click on register, it's just like registering for any other website. It's going to send you an email. You're going to have to set up a password, and then you'll have your email and password to log on. So if you go to the next screen, it will look a bit like this. Yep. So you get your email, and then onto the next screen, you'll then be able to log in. Here we go, and it will look a bit like this. So you'll then see the personal grants application form and the closing date will be there. As I said, it's going to be on the 7th of March, 5 o'clock. If we change that, that's where you'll find out. You click on start and you will get this screen. So this is to make sure that you're aware of our privacy notice, just for information governance sake, our information security policy, and also the agreement will be linked there that we're asking you to sign up to as part of this project. So if you understand all that and click on start, you'll then get some guidance about how to complete the application. There will be the service specification here. So that's a bit more detail about how we're anticipating the services to be delivered, and also some guidance for applicants. If you have any questions throughout this process, you can always email us at programs@homelessnessimpact.org. Any questions that are asked, we'll publish those so everyone can see them. We won't tell you who asked the questions, obviously, but as that's information people are looking for, we want to make sure that's available to everyone. Okay, and then you'll get to this screen. So this is the information that we're looking for. It's hopefully quite light touch for you. So organization and contact details, as you can imagine, whether you're working in partnership and which area you want to work in. Has someone executive level in your organization agreed to take part? So that could be your executive director, it could be your chief exec, it could be a committee, depending on your organizational size. I would ask that you go and find out this information following today so you can get all this sorted ahead of time. What our questions are going to be, our evaluation questions, and then there's a conflict of interest question at the end, just to make sure that you don't have any conflict of interest with us or KCL and vice versa. So you go into the questions. So there will be an additional question here, and it's just to make sure that you're currently operating in Belfast and London. So that will be the first question. The next question is how many referrals you expect to make over 6 months. So I think this here, we're looking for you to have a bit of a conversation within your teams. So again, it's people experiencing homelessness or rough sleeping. It's people in any forms of temporary accommodation. And then having a bit of a chat within your team about what you think perhaps your current caseload like, how many people you think you could be eligible for the project. We appreciate this is a wee bit of like guessing into the future, and you might not know how many people you're working with. But again, if you look at the last 6 months data, perhaps that might give you a hint. And this is really important for us, so we know we have the right number of organizations that we're working with, so we get those right number of referrals, which can give us that robust evidence. And then there's one final check, I guess, there is that there's not a similar service operating in the area. Now, I don't expect there to be a similar service operating in the area. We certainly don't know about it and be very interested if there was, but we just have to make sure. And again, that's so that our business as usual group aren't also getting this intervention from another organization. again, I'm expecting that answer to be no. So then we move on to the next slide. So these are the questions that we're going to ask, and this is what you'll be evaluated against. The previous slides are just screening questions, so that we know some information. These are the key ones. Again, there's a QR code at the end, so you don't need to write them down right now. You can go and see our slide deck. So why you want to be involved, and your experience of working on innovative projects in the past. So this is about delivering something new. What you anticipate that referral mechanism or pathway to be into the projects to make sure that target number is reached. How you would support people through that and facilitate the payment. And then key for us is, this is being evaluated. So again, how you would work with that embedded researcher. There's a word limit on each of those. You see there's a percentage weighting for each of the scores, and there will be a scoring rubrics published as well, and we'll give you guidance about how we will score each of those questions within that. It'll be on a 0 to 4. Don't write this down. We'll give you the link at the end again. Okay. And then once you've completed all those 5 sections, this box will suddenly appear at the top of the screen, and you can click on Submit Application, and that's it done. It then sits with us, and we'll go through the process. So that's the application process, but I appreciate that's the kind of like bit we have to talk about. What we're really interested in here is, can we make a difference to people experiencing rough sleeping and homelessness? These are some of the comments that people have given us in the past, and I think it speaks to me as well about the potential that this intervention has for people that you're currently working with, and why we think it'll be really interesting. If this does work, that's what we're here to find out. Can we make a convincing case to others to scale it across the nations in the UK and perhaps wider as well. So we're now going to move to a bit of Q&A, but I'll just leave this screen on for a wee moment. If you use your camera on your phone or lens or whatever you have, and you use that link, it should take you to this very same slide deck. It is the exact same one that Guillermo has on the screen at the moment. And that's where you get all the questions. If it doesn't work, email us programs@homelessnessimpact.org, and we'll happily send it out to you as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Graham. And now's the moment if you were waiting to put your questions in the Q&A box. It's at the bottom of the screen there next to the chat and everything else. So do add your questions. Ordinarily, we would just let you put your hands up like on a Teams call, but because we're recording this, we wanted to not have you recorded forever and sitting on our website asking your questions. That's why we're using the Q&A boxes. So I'll start. There's a couple of questions in there. So Graham and Guillermo, if you can just step in, and then I'll wait for others to add there. So the first question is, you've sort of answered it, but it's a very straightforward one. How many organisations will be selected? You've suggested it's as many as you need, but do you have a sense of it at all?
Yeah, you can maybe take down the slides now, Guillermo, if you want. So in a similar project where we were looking for 360 participants in total, we had 10 organizations working with us. What I will say, though, is it totally depends on the number of referrals. We're quite happy to work with smaller organizations and larger organizations. The key for us is that we get a number of referrals. I would say, actually, in our experience, some of the smaller organizations, they were more likely to get the referrals, just because of the way the communication is able to happen. So if you're they're thinking you're a smaller organization, that's totally fine. Like we found them to be really great to work with as well. But yeah, it's really how many we need to get to that magic number for us of 500.
So 10 organisations that do 50, because I'm good at maths, but you could have some organisations that just want to refer 10 people, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
It all just adds up and goes into the mix. Thank you. And then somebody said, should we be sure that people are going to spend the funds on something worthwhile before we refer them to the project? So I don't know who wants to answer that question.
No. So the idea of the cash transfer is to really give that agency to people. So the objective of the project is to let people decide how they want to use the funding, and really they should keep the ultimate say. So if in the conversation between the two case workers, you have a really high perception that there is a really high potential risk of harm for the person, then you shouldn't suggest that person for the project. But in any other case, if someone wants to spend the money on a TV on furniture, on going to the cinema, on doing absolutely everything, anything to connect with their family or anything that they consider relevant, please let them do it, because the point of cash transfer is to give that agency.
Great, thank you. And another question, maybe one for you, Graham. Can organisations apply collaboratively, like together with partners?
Yeah, absolutely. We're happy to do that. Sorry if you can get some background noise. The dog is deciding to scratch himself. Yeah, so again, we have experience of doing that in the past. So in other projects, we've had voluntary community sector organizations working together. And another time we've had a local authority a bid, but they were kind of bidding on behalf of like 10 charities within them. The key thing for us, though, if that type of arrangement does take place, is again that the embedded researcher can get to all of those areas, and that we might need to sign agreements with all of those, depending on where the finance is kind of going. So we're absolutely happy for that either partnership bids or a lead organization bid, where we will work with it to make it work.
Thank you. And just talk about the embedded researcher. We talked about London and Belfast being the two sites for the project. So is the intention that the referrals will be split equally, 50-50? Will the researcher spend their time in both places, or will they be more in one place than the other? Can you just explain a bit about that?
So the embedded researcher will, I guess, go where we end up working with people, and that will be across Belfast and London. We really want them to be there. We're kind of just going through that interview process at the moment, and that is very explicit in our job advert. In terms of, it doesn't need to be 50-50. Like, we appreciate that, London is probably many times the population of Belfast. I don't know that off the top of my head. But then again, it'd be really interesting for us. I know for some of the partners we're working with, they're really interested in working across the four nations. So you'll see that we had Scotland and Wales in phase 1, so as well as England. So I think it's really interesting to have Belfast and Northern Ireland in phase 2 and London in phase 2 as well. So across both phases of the work, we'll get all four nations of the UK represented.
Thank you. And maybe one for you, Guillermo, about the randomised nature of the trial. It's a bit unusual in the homelessness world, I think. And I know in the past people have said, is it fair that only half the people get the money? Will it cause resentment or bad feeling for those people that get put forward but don't get selected to receive the money, and they get put into the group that we're calling the control group, I think. Have we managed that or dealt with that in other projects?
It's a really, really good question. And I think at the starting point is that we don't know if this will work. And given that we don't know if this will work, we really need to create the type of evidence that is needed so that if it does work, then this will enable to make investments so that many more people who are experiencing homelessness can receive this type of support. The second key thing is that we know that if you had the chance to receive financial support and in the end you won't, there might be disappointment. And that's why it's really important that as part of the briefing, as part of the initial conversations, we're really transparent and we're really clear that people might receive some financial support, but also there's a chance that they might not. A really important point as well is that even for those that don't take part in the intervention group, those that are in the control group, we know that we're asking for their time as part of all of the surveys. So we will be offering a financial incentive, a small financial incentive for the completion of every single one of the surveys at the baseline, at the midline, and at the end of around £20. And everyone will be eligible for that as a token of appreciation for their time.
And presumably they'll get whatever support they would have got anyway. They're not losing. It's just that half the people are gaining the opportunity for this money. So I think that's quite important to get across to people, isn't it, really?
Absolutely.
Okay, two more quick questions about the process. So if somebody applies and says, I can do 50 referrals in that 6-month period, but they don't reach that for whatever reason, the estimate was wrong or something changes in the service, is that a problem?
No, there's nothing, we will work with you to try to get to that 50. We will, we are as I said earlier on, we're looking for 500 in total, and we know we will get 250. So in some ways we want to build that into our process. And again, that's based on our experience in the past of running projects similar to this. We would ask that you are realistic as possible. And that's really important for us. We are a small team. We don't want to work with like 50 organizations on this. That would be pretty impractical for us. So we just ask you to be realistic, and we can make decent choices based on that. But yeah, if you say 50 and it ends up being 40, then that's the way it's gone.
Thank you, Graham. And go on, Clem,
just to build on that, I think that's absolutely right. We're not necessarily going to pick organizations simply because they're larger, because I think that our experience of working with smaller organizations has been really positive. But if throughout your process you feel that your original assumptions might not have been completely right, the sooner you tell us, the better, so we can take all of the mitigations that might be needed.
Thank you. And here's, I've heard this before actually, from the personal budgets trial, I think it was. So if word gets out or participants know that they're going to get 2,000 if they come to my service, like, will it mean that people come to the service just for that? And like, what does that mean in terms of the project?
That's a really, really important point. And I mentioned that as part of one of the key 5 things for a reason. So participation has to be voluntary, but also we can create undue pressure to participate. And of course, if everyone knows that there's potentially £2,000 if you're going to this specific day center, there might increase the number of people going there, and we don't want to create that. So in all of the initial conversations, it's really, really important that we just tell people that there might be a financial incentive, but we don't say the details of what that financial payment might be. And after people are told, they are also informed that they should keep that information to themselves, exactly to try to avoid that type of problem. If the word spreads and we hear that more people are getting to know that there is a financial incentive and that there's £2,000 on the line, we might need to close down that site, because that potentially creates undue pressure on the organization, but also it might create undue pressure on the people to participate, and that would potentially be unethical.
Okay, thank you. And I think we've sort of answered this, but I'll ask it. It's like a different way of asking it. It's like if someone is using substances at the moment, as is often the case with people who are experiencing homelessness, does that mean that they can go forward, they can be referred, or should they not be referred? We've talked about the things that people spend money on and whether we try and sort of steer people a bit. But in terms of this, I think you did talk about it, Graham, but can we just be really clear about it in terms of who can be referred and who shouldn't be referred?
Yes, so I'm absolutely clear that people can be referred. So people using alcohol and other drugs, can absolutely become eligible for the project. What we're asking folks to do is just to think about some of those risks. So we're aware from other examples, and I've got a service delivery background as well, and I've unfortunately had to attend too many drug-related death review meetings, like some of the people watching today might have done as well. And we're aware that where there's like unplanned transfers, perhaps DWP back payments and the like, that does create a lot of risk. So we are aware of that, but these will be planned. Your support worker will know about it, your organization will know about it. And again, we have that 2-week cooling off period. And that's, I guess, one of our mitigations for that. Also, this is about testing, kind of that assets-based approach. This is about testing whether this works. So we are, absolutely, we'd support people coming onto the project who are using alcohol and other drugs.
And presumably that would extend to people with experience of the criminal justice system, or people with other needs around perhaps mental health or other things. Yeah. So it's as open as it can be. And we're really just looking at the risk in terms of this particular person's circumstances and whether they're vulnerable or,
So risk to self or others, that is really high. And there's a wee bit more detail in the full specification that'll be published, but that could be suicidal ideation or behaviors associated with that. And I think I said earlier on, or that could be risk of harm to others. So that's why it's important that the bank account's in their name and that the money goes to as well. There's and whether there's been a previous conviction, and again, it's a conviction for fraud or they're like or trend like that, I guess. That's the only times that we'd be looking to exclude someone from the project. We are relying on the the good skills of the support workers of the organisations to help us with that as well.
Thank you very much, Graham. Yeah. So I think we're almost at time, and I think that is the questions covered. So I think we'll leave it there. I mean, to say again that we've recorded this webinar, we're going to make it available on the website. So if you've got colleagues that you couldn't make it today, who you think need to know about the project, if you know other partners that aren't on the call today, or you talking to other partners in Belfast or London, then do let them know about it, and they can get in touch or look at the website. They can see the project brief there, they can see an outline of the project, they can see this webinar recording, and they'll see the link to the Flexi Grant application when it's open. So that'll be the place to go to make your application. Really grateful to you all for coming today and for your interest in the project, and hope that we can be working with you and signing a contract with the organisation to participate when we get to May through the application process and on the other side. So we're really excited. We think that there's real potential for this to be really life-changing and deliver some really good outcomes for the people that we work with and want to do well. So thanks very much, and we'll see you soon. Take care.